One rule that I have for myself is when I find myself thinking something positive about somebody, like, oh my God, she's great. That's amazing. I try to find someone to tell. And if I can do it that moment, great. Or if not, look for a moment in the future, because that's how you take authentic things you believe and turn them into status building efforts for someone else.
This is the Visible Voices podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Dr. Alison Fragale, a likable badass, professor of business, organizational psychologist, speaker, and author. Author of Likeable Badass, How Women Get the Success They Deserve. Alison is a Dartmouth grad, go green, with a PhD in organizational behavior from Stanford. Notably, she worked as a management consultant at McKinsey and Company. It just so happens that she and I have a Venn diagram of overlaps: a love of coffee, an appreciation for the Golden Girls, being socially adept, yet at the same time introverts, and possessing a shared understanding of what it means to be someone who commands respect and admiration through strength, competence, and confidence, and at the same time is kind, emotionally intelligent, and approachable. Alison, welcome to the Visible Voices podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So virtually every podcast host asks you to define what is a likable badass. I am not one of those hosts. And in fact, I took it to ChatGPT. A likable badass is someone who commands respect and admiration through strength, competence, and confidence, but does so in a way that's also kind, approachable, and emotionally intelligent. Think Michelle Obama, Soledad O'Brien, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Thoughts?
I love it. Score one for ChatGPT. I'd like to think that it got that by mining the things that I put out there in the world about likable badass, but I think it's pretty good.
I then said, is Alison Fragale a likable badass?
Oh, okay.
ChatGPT says you are a textbook likable badass because you're confident without arrogance, competent and commanding yet deeply human, emotionally intelligent and generous, authentic and unapologetic, and you inspire through action, not just words. You're not just a likable badass. You might be the one defining and redefining what that looks like.
Well, that is lovely. Now, I'm curious. Did you put in other names to see if it says the same thing about everyone? Does it flatter us all equally?
It's almost like you were an audience plant. I did type in Resa E. Lewis. I was actually nervous. Like, it's almost like you're opening up your end of class evaluations. Like, what did they say about me? Or
Totally.
What's my year-end evaluation? So, believe it or not making this up, audience, it says that Resa E. Lewis is a quintessential likable badass. And here's exactly why. Brilliant and bold, but approachable. Values-driven and unapologetically vocal. I educate with empathy. Lead without ego, and refreshingly real. How are you different having written this book?
It's brought me into contact with different people. It's made me realize the universal challenges and struggles that women have. I mean, I wrote it because I thought it was representative of a lot that I knew people experienced from my own life, from all the conversations I've had, from all the science, et cetera. But the number of people who have come to me who don't know me, who've just found me through the book and either put a name to something that I was pretty good at doing, but I had no way to articulate it. And now I can actually understand it and teach it, which is great. Or it's explained to me why I've struggled with things and given me a lot of hope and ideas to go forward. So that just surprised me. You write a book and you write it. You've done this, right? You write it so people will read it. But when you're so head down writing it, the concept that it would find its way to a person who doesn't know you and that would impact a life feels very abstract. And so when it does, that's been great. So it's gotten me to, I think, look at the world a little bit differently, but same me.
Did you write a book that you wish you'd been given?
In some ways, I wrote a book that I was given. I wrote a book that I was a beneficiary of a couple of really good pieces of advice at different ages of my life, combined with having a natural interest in being a psychologist that I think made me look at the world this way at an earlier age than many other people, the mentoring plus my day job. But I thought that had always been my competitive advantage. So it wasn't so much that I felt like I had struggled and then I needed this. It was more people helped me figure this out earlier. And as a result, I could see myself succeed where a lot of other people I knew who were really talented struggled.
To that end, you talk about age and early ages. What was the elementary school and the high school Alison like?
Well, I mean, part of this is like one of my lessons that I got. So I was always very oriented towards school. My oldest son just turned 16 on Friday. We're going to do driver's license stuff today. So we've been having a lot of conversations about these stages of life. He feels a little bit young for his grade. His birthday's in April. He feels a little bit young. I said, oh, I was even younger than you. Wouldn't have turned 16 until I was a junior, which is not as common anymore. But I didn't turn 16 until October of my junior year. So I was young. And I say this because when I started school, younger than other people, because my parents thought I was ready. But my dad was really nervous because I was younger, that I was socially going to be ostracized. I wasn't going to have friends. And so from a very young age, he was impressing upon me how important it was to like be social and have friends and focus on this. And so I think he also worried that I was going to be a bit of a nerd or that I was going to be a bit of a snob. Like, school comes easier to me than it does for you and no one's going to like me. So he was hyper focused on me being nice to people and making friends. And I didn't understand. I was like, I think I can make friends. But because that was such a narrative, and I think that was his concern, I went into elementary school really focused on the most important thing is to be nice to people and to make friends. And I wasn't getting lectures about how I was supposed to do my homework and study because I was the kid who did all that stuff. I was getting lectures on making friends. And I was very social. And then my dad, when I got to high school and I was extremely social, my dad was like, I can't believe I worried about this. I really wish you would stay in more and do some more homework instead of running around hanging out with all of your friends. But it did give me a self-awareness to the point of perhaps a self-consciousness about never wanting anybody to feel bad in my presence and being hyper-focused on how could I make sure that people around me were feeling good? Sometimes to my detriment, like any people pleasing can go too far. But a lot of times to my benefit, where I would just start to pay a lot of attention to my audience and what reaction I was getting. And like, did my teachers like me? And did my friends like me? And ways that helped me navigate how I showed up to build good relationships.
I just want to tie into, based on what you shared about high school and this not wanting people to feel bad in your presence, you talk about this introduction dodgeball. And I experienced the exact same. And I too used to say, people, where do you go to college? Providence. But ultimately, they would want to know the name. So I used to just say Providence. Where did you go to medical school? Philadelphia. Where did you train? Hospitals in Boston. Vague. And it's like, well, then they think you're just trying to put on this false humble. So I'm wondering your relationship to the introduction dodgeball, where you started versus how you approach it now.
Same thing. In fact, I just did a webinar for Dartmouth, my alma mater, my undergrad alma mater. I just did a webinar for the women of Dartmouth last week.
Go great.
And I happened to bring this up that I played introduction dodgeball. And I always would say I went to school in New Hampshire. And the number of people on the Zoom that laughed or raised their hand, I was like, wow, I'm really not alone. Until the book, I hadn't really talked to anyone about this, although there is research on this. There is research on when people belong to a higher status group, they are more likely to try to conceal that identity. So when people belong to a high status group, like an alma mater, they are more likely to try to conceal that identity because they don't want to be seen as immodest or bragging. I didn't know that science at the time, but that's what I would do. And I would just say I went to school in New Hampshire. And then sometimes people would leave it at that. But as you know, sometimes people say, oh, where? And then like, unlike you, like Providence is also the name of school. So like maybe they would think that's where you went and they would drop it. And finally, I would have to then say it. And it just would seem strange. Like, why did it take 8 questions to get that out of you? And so now a couple of things. One thing I came to realize is that in certain contexts, my educational achievements are one of the quickest ways to establish credibility with an audience. So I do a lot of speaking and you get introed or you have to intro yourself and you have 10 seconds to say something, to say, I'm worth listening to before you jump into the content. And so I never love it, but I've gotten more comfortable recognizing, especially as a woman who I get less young by the day, but I started as an academic when I was 28 years old in business academia, where I was routinely speaking to people who were older than me, some twice my age, and often men. So I realized I didn't have instant credibility when I walked into a room. And so if I was going to give up quick signals of credibility, I could be putting myself in a situation where I would be seen as lacking credentials when in fact that wasn't the case. So I never love it, but I started to think about the psychology of it and say, okay, there are contexts where that really matters. And to the concepts that I talk about in the book, respect is based on two dimensions. It's your capability. So like ChatGPT said, right? You're confident, you're competent, you're capable, but also you're warm, you're friendly, you're likable, you're humble, both of those dimensions. And hiding a credential, for example, it might get you something on humble, maybe, but it doesn't get you anything on capable. And so you're better off saying, let me just be my authentic self. Here's where I went to school. Okay, fine. And if people see that as a mark of credibility, great. And then to think about, okay, what do I do now to play up the other dimension rather than try to downplay myself, be me, but also make sure that whoever I'm talking to doesn't feel that I'm competing with them, then that I am kind and I am generous and I am helpful.
You referenced respect, you referenced status. I'm wondering if there's been a recent time where you have experienced disrespect. You felt full on disrespected.
So I am in an unusual situation in that I live now in Chicago and my university affiliation is the University of North Carolina, where I started in 2004. But for the past 10 years, I've lived in Chicago because of my husband's job and my husband's dream to live in his hometown, which is he was born and raised here in Chicago. So I always joke I went remote before remote was cool and before COVID. And where the idea of not being physically present in an organization where most of the time people are, right, in the university, academia, was a status and respect kind of killing move as a woman, especially for the reason I was leaving. I was leaving because my husband had a job opportunity. And it didn't manifest itself in out and out hostility, but it manifested itself in feeling a bit marginalized for reasons I could actually understand, which is you've communicated in a way that your life is more important to you than your job because you've decided you're going to take your life 1,000 miles away and you're going to fly back and forth and you're going to still do all the things you have to do. But yeah, it was a moment where I felt like I lost status in the eyes of some people that I was colleagues with. I talk in the book about that decision and how that decision was not hard for me, even though it had status consequences, because it had other benefits of things that were really important to me in my life. And so I think a lot of times when we are disrespected, it doesn't manifest itself in aggression or hostility. It just manifests itself in you're not influential anymore. When you speak, no one really listens that much. You kind of get cut out of the decision making or the information flows, things like that. And yeah, when you sense those things, it's not a good feeling. And so that's what I try to help people reclaim.
What you just shared reminds me a lot of like mid-career invisibility, what happens with women, particularly in the workplace, in essentially every industry I can think of right now, the gendered ageism and what happens in terms of being present, being on people's minds, being invited to the table versus the slow, subtle, insidious invisibility that can happen.
And I cite one study in the book that was doubly interesting to me because not only was it about women's power and status, but it also was done using a sample of academics and finding that as female professors got older, their course evaluations got worse in a particular way. They were seen as more capable or as capable as when they were younger, but they were also seen as a lot less warm and nice. And overall, it made them be seen as a lot more like bitchier, if you will, or quarrelsome. And so overall, the evaluations went down compared to their younger selves. So you would think that some teachers might be skilled and great and others less so, but they found that even when you compared you to younger you would be treated more harshly as you got more senior. And then as you got even more senior than that, because you started to become a little bit less powerful, a little bit less relevant, then you were liked again because you were harmless again. Whereas for men, they didn't see that curve, right? They just saw them continue to be seen as warm, even though they were seen as equally or more capable as they got more experience. And so sometimes at the height of our power, which often comes kind of mid-career, not end-end, right? Our power relationship. And then we kind of crest over and we give up some power as we're thinking about exiting and our legacy and things like that. That height of that power, you can see women experience some of the worst interpersonal treatment because they don't have the status that goes along with that increase in power.
It's graduation season, and guess what? There's a perfect gift for anyone taking their next big step. It's called Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact, co-authored by Dr. Resa E. Lewis. This book breaks down success into specific intentional behaviors that anyone can develop. whether you're a student entering the workforce or simply wanting to improve your daily interactions. And who wouldn't want to do that? These evidence-based techniques will transform how you communicate and present yourself. What makes this book so special is that it doesn't offer generic advice. It provides actionable resources that make a real difference in all aspects of your life. Available in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook formats wherever you get your books. And if you're looking to bring micro skills to your organization or student group, reach out to Dr. Lewis directly via LinkedIn or through her website. Remember, micro skills, your go-to graduation gift that keeps on giving throughout life's journey.
Status. When we gain status, I'm interested in some ways that you like to give status away, share status with others who might benefit from what you can share, give, offer, support.
One of the most important things about status is it's our resource that we have. It's how much other people respect and regard us. So when I use my status to try to build yours, it doesn't deplete mine. I don't have to spend some of it to give it to you. I think the simplest way to do it is basically to announce as broadly and as publicly as you can that someone else is amazing. And remembering that status is about these two dimensions that just talk about how they're very capable and also to talk about how they're warm and kind and other oriented. And the more you can talk about people in that way, then that will build their status. So in my book, I spend a whole chapter talking about this, about other promotion. So self-promotion is I say good things about me. But other promotion is other people say good things about me, or I say good things about other people. And it's such an important way that we can build status. One, because it's super efficient. So as we're having this conversation, right, outside in the world are all kinds of people that know you and know me and respect us and think highly of us. So if we have to just do all of our status building ourselves, we'll do a pretty good job, but you're just going to run out of time. You just can't keep in touch with or stay in front of that many people. But other people can. So you've had this, I've had this. Someone wake up and check my social media and someone else has posted something about me or something. I went to an event and Alison spoke. That's amazing other promotion. I was sleeping. And while I was sleeping, someone else was telling their entire network something about me that was some combination of she's capable and she's kind. And so what that does is people who don't know me or know me but don't know me well are getting a piece of information to update their opinion of who I am. And that's so powerful because then when you enter a relationship, you don't enter as a blank slate. You already enter with an advantage. So what I would tell people is one of the most authentic and strategic things you can do is become an evangelical promoter of other people's good work. It's one of the main things I do also, how I use my social media. It's like, who else can I talk up? Who else can I amplify? But one rule that I have for myself is when I find myself thinking something positive about somebody, like, oh my God, she's great. That's amazing. I try to find someone to tell. And if I can do it that moment, great. Or if not, I kind of like look for a moment in the future because that's how you take authentic things you believe and turn them into status building efforts for someone else.
I want to go back through This Is Your Life, Alison Fragale. So you went to college, you started working at McKinsey, then you went to graduate school. And I'm wondering if your experience at McKinsey is what nudged you to want to study human behavior, organizational management, and psychology.
Sure. I always wonder if I didn't work at McKinsey, would I be doing what I'm doing now? And a couple of reasons. One was I hated it. And so I needed to get out. If I had found a job I liked more from the beginning, maybe I would have just stayed in that job forever. And I did intend to pursue a business career. So part of me was the idea is like I had to get out. And the other was it was an interesting little snow globe to observe human behavior because it's a weird set of interpersonal dynamics where you as a consultant are constantly an outsider and a newcomer in someone else's world, a person who often doesn't want you there. And so a lot of the things that are core of what I teach now, how do you influence people? How do you negotiate with them? How do you get them to respect you when you don't really have any power? Those things were part and parcel of having to just survive as a consultant. So it definitely stoked my interest in human behavior that I hadn't really been able to label until that point, because there was a lot of interesting psychological things happening. And then, the fact that I didn't love the work. And I talk about this a bit in the book. I had a very formative bad experience in the very first project I ever worked on. And that was I worked with a more senior teammate who was a jerk, a dumb jerk, let's just say it like that. But he was a dumb jerk with an amazing reputation. that everyone said, oh my God, that guy's on your team. He's amazing. So I was like, oh, great. He's amazing. It's my first day. Here we go. Going to go off to meet Mr. Amazing. He was not amazing. He was mean. He was dumb. And it was miserable working under him. But I was also flabbergasted that this place, which was described as kind of the best and the brightest, this is what they valued. Well, long story short, I, along with a friend, finally figure out, took us like a good 18 months, finally figure out that the reason the guy has a great reputation is because he has self-promoted himself into it. He basically tells everybody what a great job he's doing. And most people don't work with him, so they don't know. So like he's doing a great job. And he was really good at managing up. So he made superiors think he was doing a good job. So there weren't that many people who could really see behind the curtain. But a lot of times when people hear those kind of things or they encounter people like him, they get super turned off from promoting themselves because they think, look at like what a fraud that guy is. And it's all smoke and mirrors. But I drew a very, very different lesson from it. Even though it really drove me out of McKinsey before I had even really started, I drew a different lesson. And the lesson I figured out was like, wow, storytelling's pretty impressive. Because if somebody who has no talent can basically storytell themselves into a great reputation at a firm that is extremely competitive, imagine what storytelling could do if you actually had talent. So I left there not wanting to be a consultant, really interested in human behavior, but also with this belief that storytelling really matters.
This happens all the time in healthcare. Not particularly good physicians, not particularly kind people, definitely not looking to share the space and share the air, but they control that narrative with who they are and how great they are, et cetera, et cetera. And people are like, did you hear how great they were? I'm like, no, I've heard them say how great they were, but that's not been my experience.
Totally. And again, think about it like when the people who are great, then they pull back. So like, I don't want to be like that. That's so unappealing. But then I think, well, what happens? You have great storytelling being done by people with no talent. All the people with talent have no stories to tell. And you can't compete like that. So I just think just because you're using the same behavior doesn't mean that you're saying you have the same underlying characteristics. I always say, like, I'm talking to people who I presume are caring and are capable. And then all I'm helping you do is get more credit for it by leveraging all the tools that you have, including telling your story.
You were a math major, then you worked for McKinsey. And I'm wondering again, like you have intentionally written a book and designated your audience as really trying to help everybody, sure, but this resonates with women. And is it because of a reaction to some of these very male experiences, meaning studying STEM, McKinsey?
Not really. I went through most of my life pretty unaware of gender dynamics. Like I think about my mom's generation where my mom said, you know, there was only 3 things you could really be if you wanted to work. You could be a nurse, a secretary, or a teacher, right? By the time I come along, right, it's like you can be whatever you want, but it's kind of just like, gender, what? No gender, just one of the guys, just do it. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. And I didn't have anything really bad happen to me. I don't think even that experience with that consultant, you know, when I started there, wasn't even sure that was very gender based. I think he might have done that with everybody. It wasn't really until I had kids that I really started to think about the fact that my life and my professional life and my male colleagues' lives were really different. But what happened, I always say, like, I didn't choose to help women. The women chose me. And what I mean by that is that once I became a professor, I'm talking to teaching students, MBA students, I'm speaking in organizations. Most of those audiences are majority male. But in any time you speak, you will have people come up to you privately to talk to you afterward or reach out to you after the event. And I noticed something over the years that even though the women were numerically fewer in the audience, they represented a vast majority of who was coming to me, who wanted to talk to me at the podium or who wanted to meet with me. And when they wanted to talk with me, they always wanted to talk about something that was challenging for them. You know, not getting a raise, not getting promoted, having their male client always want to talk to their boss instead of them. Just different things, right? Being interrupted in meetings, stuff like that. And as I started to talk with them one-on-one, first of all, it took me a while to realize, oh, there's a pattern here. The women are seeking me out. And then once I did, I realized there was 2 things. One was that I looked like them. Like if they were going to ask somebody, I was a safe person because they thought Alison might be able to empathize with this, which was true. And what it also made me realize was how much my day job, being an organizational psychologist, was helping me navigate my own career. And I hadn't been that aware of it, meaning my job is to both conduct and read research on human behavior. So what it allowed me to do once the women started to come and I realized, okay, there's a need here. We are not serving women as well as we can with the science of my field. It also then allowed me to bring into conversation something that had largely been left out to that point, which was my own lived experience. And I feel like, for all the years that women got the information last, why shouldn't women get the information first?
Voice. When did you realize you had a voice, and when did you start using that voice?
I'm a very talkative introvert, and I'm a good storyteller. And I definitely told a lot of stories in my teaching, not always about me and my lived experience, but just in general. And so I would always teach that way, and it made me successful. As an academic, though, your stories don't have a great place in your writing. And so in terms of a voice, I felt confident in my voice all along, but my written voice is something that probably came out a bit in COVID, actually, when I started posting on social media, when I had a friend who was nagging me to do it. And I finally got bored enough in COVID that I decided I would give it a try. I was very resistant. I didn't think it would be something I would like. But I go on LinkedIn and I realize this is spectacular. I can write about whatever I want. Maybe people like it, maybe people don't, but I don't have to have 3 people edit it. I don't have to go 4 rounds of revisions. I'm just going to say it. And what constitutes advice or help is just totally different than what constitutes advice or help in academic writing. So I felt freed from a very, very constrained form of writing, similar like medical journals, right? You're like, it has a formula that's there for a purpose, but it is not loose and free. And there is, you don't get to tell a story. So I found I really liked it. And then that was coinciding with me putting the proposal in for the book and figuring that out as I wrote the book, like what is my writing voice of how to be me in person, which is always trying to be deeply academic, extremely practical, and fun and entertaining at the same time, and how to translate that into writing. So that might be one way when you asked me at the very beginning to circle back how the book has changed me. I do think it's given me more confidence in my written voice, that I could translate all 3 of those elements that are really important to my identity as an educator and put them on a page.
The Resa wrap-up. Special thanks to Dr. Alison Fragale for joining me in conversation. Audience, Alison is an author, a keynote speaker, an organizational psychologist, a professor, and a likable badass. If you want to learn more, see more, read more, hear more, you can follow her via her website, AlisonFragale.com. That's ALISON, Fragale, FRAGALE.com. She's under the same names on LinkedIn and on Instagram. So some take-home points from our conversation. Number 1, a likable badass is both confident yet kind and approachable. Number 2, status is a critical currency for professional success. Promoting others can actually enhance your own status. Next, storytelling, exquisitely valuable, and it's a powerful tool for reputation building. And finally, understanding your workplace currency can improve your professional relationships. That's all I have for you this week, audience. See you next time. The Visible Voices podcast amplifies voices in the healthcare, equity, and current trends spaces. We are a production of the People's Media Network. Our team includes Dr. Giuliano DePortu and me, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. Please find me through my website and on social media, Resa E. Lewis, MD, or through the podcast, thevisiblevoicespodcast.com. Please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, please be sure to share the show with a friend. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the institution with which they are affiliated or identified. Information herein should never be used as a substitute for clinical judgment or for medical advice.